The human was surrounded. The cubs jumped into the fight. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Nobody, and I mean nobody, expected the human to survive that day. Certainly not the Krellian assault team that surrounded her in that dead-end alley on Station Meridian 7. And definitely not the 4 fuzzy idiots who decided to get involved. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Her name was Jennifer Vasquez, though everyone on the station just called her Jen the Maintenance Lady, which honestly sounds way less cool than it should. According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. She was one of those humans who decided that living on the edge of civilized space, fixing broken air recyclers, was somehow preferable to whatever Earth had to offer. Can't say I blame her. I've seen Earth's tax forms. Jen was what you'd call aggressively average for a human. About 170 centimeters tall, dark hair usually tied back in some kind of functional knot situation, and she wore the kind of jumpsuit that screamed, "I have given up on fashion and embraced pockets." She had exactly 3 expressions: tired, more tired, and "I'm going to fix this with percussive maintenance." Now, the Krellians. Oh boy, the Krellians. Imagine if someone took a crocodile, gave it anger management issues, and then told it that mercy was for the weak. 7 feet of scaled muscle, teeth that could bite through starship hull plating, and an attitude that made galactic warlords look like kindergarten teachers. They were, in the parlance of our times, bad news bears, except, with more murder and less honey. There were 6 of them. 6, against 1 human with a wrench. The cubs, though. The cubs were something else entirely. They belonged to the Rylothian species, which sounds impressive until you realize they're basically space otters. Furry, about a meter tall when standing upright, with big eyes that made you want to feed them treats, and tiny paws that seemed designed exclusively for holding snacks. Their whole species had a reputation for being, and I quote the Galactic Council's official records here, adorably useless in combat situations. The 4 of them were students. Kids, really. There was Pip, who wanted to be a botanist and frequently got distracted by shiny plants. Kessa, the self-proclaimed smart one, who had once tried to calculate the exact trajectory of a thrown sandwich and ended up covered in lunch meat. Tauren, who was scared of literally everything, including his own shadow on certain lighting conditions. And Mira, who had the attention span of a caffeinated goldfish, but somehow aced all her exams through what I can only assume was blind luck and the favor of benevolent cosmic entities. These 4 walking teddy bears had been attending Jen's basic station safety classes for 3 weeks. They loved her, absolutely adored her. She taught them how to patch hull breaches, how to restart oxygen systems, and most importantly, she never talked down to them like every other species did. The other instructors on the station treated Rylothians like cute decorations. "Oh, isn't that precious? The little otter wants to learn about plasma conduits." That kind of garbage. But Jen, she treated them like actual students. She expected them to learn, to try, to succeed. When Pip accidentally welded his tail to a bulkhead during a practical exam, she didn't laugh. She taught him how to unweld it safely and then made him do it 3 more times until he got it right. That's why they worshipped her. So when they saw her surrounded by 6 Krellian pirates in Dock Bay 47, their tiny otter brains made what I can only describe as the worst decision in the history of decisions, possibly ever. "We have to help Miss Vasquez," Pip squeaked, his little nose twitching with what might have been courage or possibly just gas. Hard to tell with Rylothians. "Are you insane?" Tauren hissed, which, coming from someone who once cried at a motivational poster, was rich. "Those are Krellians. They eat species like us for breakfast, literally. I read about it. There was a whole incident on Sector 9. 3 Rylothians, 1 Krellian. Very messy. They never found all the pieces." "She's our teacher," Kessa said, adjusting her translator collar with 1 paw. "The statistical probability of her surviving without intervention is approximately 2.3%. With our intervention, it increases to maybe 2.4%, but that's still an improvement. I don't like those odds, Mira added, despite definitely not understanding what odds were or how percentages worked. I don't like them either, Pip admitted. But I like the idea of Miss Vasquez dying even less. So we're doing this. Who's with me? There was a long pause. The kind of pause where sensible beings would have said, absolutely not, and called security. But these were not sensible beings. These were 4 space otters who'd bonded with a human over the proper torque specifications for hull bolts. This is stupid, Torin whispered. Completely stupid, Kessa agreed. The stupidest, Mira confirmed. Let's go, they said in unison. Meanwhile, in the alley, Jen was having what you might call a really bad day. The lead Krellian, a particularly ugly specimen named Grakthor, who had a scar that ran from his eye to his jaw in a way that suggested he'd lost a fight with a blender, circled her slowly. His claws clicked on the metal deck plating. Click, click, click. Very dramatic. He'd probably practiced in front of a mirror. Pirates are weird like that. Human, he growled, his voice like gravel being processed through a meat grinder. You've been causing problems for our operation, reporting our smuggling routes to station security. Very rude. Very, very rude. Jen tightened her grip on her wrench. It was a good wrench. Industrial grade, 15 pounds of solid steel, with a grip worn smooth from years of use. She'd had it for 5 years. It had fixed approximately 10,000 things and broken approximately 3 faces, though those incidents were officially classified as workplace accidents. She was hoping to make it 4. Maybe don't smuggle illegal weapons through a civilian station, you overgrown handbag, she said, because apparently her survival instinct was on vacation, possibly permanently. Grakthor's nostril slits flared. The other 5 Krellians closed in, cutting off any escape routes. Their scales gleamed under the bay's harsh lighting, and their teeth, oh man, their teeth were the kind that made you really appreciate your life insurance policy and regret not updating your will. You know what I admire about humans? Grakthor said, tilting his head. Your spirit, your defiance. Even when you know you're dead, you still make jokes. It's almost endearing. Almost. And you know what I admire about Krellians? Jen shot back. Absolutely nothing. You're like if someone made a personality out of bad decisions and scales. One of the other pirates laughed. A short, barking sound. Grakthor's head snapped toward him, and the laughter died immediately. Kill her, Grakthor said simply. Make it slow. I want her to regret every report she filed. And that's when 4 fuzzy, adorable space otters came charging around the corner, making a noise that can only be described as war squeaks. Now, I want you to imagine the scene. You're a 7-foot-tall killing machine. You've murdered approximately 40 beings in your career, maybe more. You stopped counting after it stopped being fun. You're about to add a human to your collection. And suddenly, 4 creatures that look like they should be selling cookies or starring in a children's educational program come screaming at you like tiny, fluffy missiles of misguided heroism. The Krellians stopped. Just stopped. Confused. Pip launched himself at the nearest pirate's leg and bit down on his ankle with the determination of someone who'd made peace with dying but was going to take a chunk out of someone first. Now, Rylothian teeth are not designed for combat. They're designed for eating fish and the occasional space fruit. But Pip, bless his little heart, tried so hard that he actually managed to draw blood through the scales. The Krellian looked down at the fuzzy thing attached to his leg with the expression of someone who'd just discovered a very angry, very determined teddy bear, had declared war on their foot. What, he said slowly, is this? Kessa had gone for the tactical approach, which involved throwing a calculator at another Krellian's face while shouting mathematical formulas. The force of this impact, given the mass of 0.3 kilograms and velocity of approximately 8 meters per second, should result in significant discomfort. It bounced off harmlessly, but she looked very proud of herself. Torin was crying and throwing punches that wouldn't have hurt a soap bubble, but he was doing it with such conviction that you had to admire the effort. Each punch was accompanied by a sob, and what might have been prayers to Rylothian deities, who were probably watching this display with second-hand embarrassment. Mira had somehow climbed onto a Krellian's back and was covering his eyes with her paws while singing what might have been her species' war song, but sounded suspiciously like a nursery rhyme about fish. And the little fish swam away, swam away, swam away, she sang cheerfully while the pirate spun in circles trying to dislodge her. It was, objectively speaking, the least effective combat performance in recorded galactic history. It was also the distraction Jen needed. Here's the thing about humans that most species don't quite get. We're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. We're not the most advanced or the most intelligent. But we are, without question, the most absolutely unhinged when it comes to protecting the things we care about. And Jen? She cared about those 4 idiotic fuzzballs more than she'd cared about anything in a long time. The first Krellian went down when Jen's wrench connected with his knee joint, which bent in a direction knees definitely aren't supposed to bend. There was a crack that echoed through the bay like a starting pistol, followed by a scream that could probably be heard 3 docks over. He went down hard, clutching his leg and making noises that suggested he was reconsidering his career choices. The second one turned just in time to catch a wrench to the snout. Krellian noses are sensitive. Like, really sensitive. It's their one major weakness, which is why they guard them so carefully in fights. But when you're distracted by a screaming otter on your back singing about fish, you tend to drop your guard. He went down clutching his face and making a noise like a broken horn being stepped on by an elephant. Grakthor roared and lunged at Jen with claws extended. She ducked, rolled, and came up swinging. The wrench caught him in the ribs with a meaty thunk. Krellian scales are tough, tougher than most metals, but physics is physics, and a 15-pound wrench swung with human arm strength and pure rage is basically a medieval mace with better grip tape. Something cracked. Grakthor stumbled backward, his eyes wide with genuine surprise. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to be easy prey. Soft, weak, not whatever this was. "Get the cubs out of here," Jen yelled, not taking her eyes off the remaining pirates. Because of course, in the middle of a life-or-death fight, this human was worried about the safety of 4 space otters who decided to join a battle they had no business being in. But the cubs, those magnificent little morons, had other ideas. "We're not leaving you, Miss Vasquez," Pip shouted, still attached to the Krellian's ankle like the world's most determined parasite. "You taught us about teamwork. Chapter 3, page 47, never abandon your crew." "I was talking about evacuations during hull breaches," Jenny shouted back, blocking a claw swipe from another pirate. "Not suicide missions against pirates." Kessa had found a crowbar from somewhere. The station was full of random tools if you knew where to look, and was attempting to use leverage and fulcrum points to trip a Krellian twice her size. It wasn't working, but her technique was textbook perfect. Torin had stopped crying and was now screaming what might have been insults in Rylothian. I don't speak the language, but I'm pretty sure he called one of them a bottom-feeding spore sucker, and questioned the legitimacy of his parents' union, which is apparently very offensive in Rylothian culture. Mira had discovered that Krellian ear holes were sensitive and was now systematically poking one of them while giggling like she was playing a game instead of participating in actual mortal combat. The fight was chaos. Beautiful, stupid, glorious chaos. Jen fought like someone who'd taken every self-defense class Earth offered, and then thrown the rulebook out the airlock. She used her wrench, her elbows, her knees, her head. At one point, she bit a Krellian's hand when he tried to grab her throat. Human teeth aren't designed for combat either, but tell that to Jen Vasquez at that moment. She bit down hard enough to break skin and didn't let go until he pulled back. The taste of Krellian blood was terrible, like copper mixed with regret and bad life choices. She spat it out and swung her wrench in a wide arc, forcing 2 pirates to back up. The thing about human endurance that other species always forget is that we don't quit. Doesn't matter if we're tired, hurt, or facing impossible odds. We just keep going. It's the same evolutionary trait that let our ancestors chase prey for days across open plains until the animal literally died of exhaustion. Persistence hunting, they called it. Humans are basically the galaxy's most terrifying stalkers, and that trait doesn't go away just because we started living on space stations. Grakthor recovered and came at Jen again, this time smarter, more careful. He was a veteran. He'd been in hundreds of fights. He'd underestimated her once. Wouldn't happen again. They circled each other. Jen was breathing hard. Blood ran down her arm from a cut she didn't remember getting. Her wrench felt heavy. Her muscles were starting to burn with fatigue. Impressive, Grakthor admitted, his voice strained from the broken ribs. For a human. For anyone, really. But you're outmatched, outgunned, and those little furballs can't save you. They can barely save themselves. Yeah, Jen panted. Probably. But here's the thing about humans, you scaly bastard. We don't fight fair. We don't fight honorably. We fight to win. She threw the wrench. Not at Grakthor. At the emergency airlock release panel behind him. Now, Station Meridian 7 had safety protocols, obviously. The airlock wouldn't just open and vent everyone into space. There were warnings, klaxons, a 30-second countdown, automatic bulkhead closures. The station had been designed by Volians, and they were nothing if not obsessively safety-conscious. But Jen had spent 3 years maintaining this station. She knew every system, every override, every shortcut, and every single faulty component that she'd been putting off fixing because the maintenance budget was a joke. She also knew that particular panel had a faulty safety interlock that she'd reported to management 6 times and been told, "We'll fix it next quarter," for the past 18 months. The airlock doors began to open immediately, and the emergency bulkhead started coming down. Grakthor's eyes went wide. The emergency bulkhead was designed to prevent catastrophic decompression by separating the dock bay into sealed sections. But right now, it was about to separate the Krellians from their escape route and trap them in a section with an opening airlock. "Time to go, Cubs," Jen shouted, grabbing the nearest fuzzy body, which happened to be Pip, and running for the bulkhead. The Cubs scattered like adorable space otters who suddenly remembered they didn't actually want to die in the cold vacuum of space. They scrambled under the descending bulkhead with Jen right behind them. 2 of the Krellians made it through. Grakthor and 1 other, both moving with the kind of speed that only comes from genuine fear. 4 didn't. The bulkhead slammed down with a finality that suggested those 4 were going to have a very unpleasant conversation with station security when they got caught on the wrong side with an opening airlock. Assuming they survived. The emergency protocols would kick in eventually, but they'd have a few very uncomfortable minutes first. Jen collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. The Cubs piled on top of her in what was either a protective formation or just a really aggressive group hug. Hard to tell. Probably both. "That was amazing," Mira squeaked. "That was terrifying," Torin corrected, his voice still shaky. "That was statistically improbable," Kessa added. "I'm going to have to recalculate my entire threat assessment model." "That was the coolest thing I've ever seen," Pip finished, his eyes wide with admiration. Jen laughed. It was the slightly unhinged laugh of someone who just survived something they absolutely shouldn't have and couldn't quite believe they were still breathing. It turned into a cough, then back into a laugh. "You 4, she said, once she could breathe again, "are the dumbest, bravest, most ridiculous little fuzzballs I've ever met." "We learned from the best," Pip said proudly, puffing out his little chest. On the other side of the bulkhead, Grakthor was reassessing his life choices. 4 of his crew were trapped in a section with an opening airlock. 2 were injured badly enough that they'd need medical attention, and he'd been bested by a maintenance worker and 4 species that the galaxy considered cute, harmless decoration. His pride would never recover. His reputation was finished. You can't come back from getting beaten by space otters. You just can't. He retreated into the shadows, knowing that this fight was lost. There would be other times, other opportunities. But for now, the human had won. And he needed to get off this station before security arrived and started asking uncomfortable questions. Station security arrived about 10 minutes later, led by Commander Thress. A Volian who looked like a blue gorilla had merged with a business executive and decided to carry a plasma rifle. She took one look at the scene. Jen covered in blood and bruises. The 4 cubs clustered around her like protective fuzzballs, the emergency protocols still blaring, and the automated distress signals lighting up her comm device. She sighed the sigh of someone who'd been through this before. "Vasquez," she said tiredly. "What did you do this time?" "Self-defense," Jen replied innocently, wincing as she shifted position. "Also, there are 4 Krellian smugglers trapped on the other side of that bulkhead. You might want to arrest them. They'll be the ones gasping for air and rethinking their life choices." Thress looked at the cubs, who were trying very hard to look innocent and failing miserably. Pip still had Krellian blood on his teeth. Kessa was holding her crowbar like she might need to use it again. Torin's eyes were red from crying. Mira was grooming her tail like nothing had happened. "And these 4? Thress asked, though she already knew the answer. "Heroes," Jen said firmly. "Absolute heroes. Deserve medals, actually. Maybe a parade. Definitely a commendation in their academic records." Pip preened. Kessa adjusted her collar smugly. Torin stopped shaking long enough to look proud. Mira was already distracted by a shiny panel on the wall, but perked up at the word parade. The security commander knew better than to argue with Jen Vasquez. The last person who'd tried ended up reassigned to the station's waste reclamation department, which was exactly as pleasant as it sounded. Besides, the cubs had technically helped stop a smuggling operation, even if their methods were unconventional and slightly suicidal. "Fine," Thress said, holstering her rifle. "Everyone to medical. Now, no arguments. And Vasquez, for the love of all that's holy, fix that airlock panel. It nearly killed you." "Yeah, that's definitely on my to-do list now," Jen admitted. "Right at the top, underlined, possibly in red." Later, in the medical bay, after the doctors had patched up Jen's cuts, confirmed that her ribs were only bruised and not broken, and verified that the cubs were somehow completely uninjured despite participating in actual combat, the 4 Rylothians sat around her bed. The medical staff kept walking by just to see the infamous group. Word had already spread through the station's gossip network, which moved faster than light-speed communications. "Miss Vasquez?" Pip asked, quietly, his usual enthusiasm dampened by the reality of what they'd just done. "Why did you stay and fight? You could have run. You're fast enough. I've seen you sprint when the cafeteria's running out of coffee." Jen looked at the 4 of them. These ridiculous, fuzzy, stupid, brave little creatures who'd charged into a fight they couldn't win because they thought she was worth saving. "Because you jumped in to help me," she said simply. "And we don't leave people behind. That's like Human 101. It's in our species manual. Page 1, bold print, possibly in all caps." "There's a manual?" Mira asked, genuinely curious and slightly hopeful. "No, there's not a manual." Kessa sighed, adjusting her medical monitoring bracelet. "I wish there was a manual," Torin muttered. "Humans are confusing. You're all crazy, but in like a good way, I think." "Thanks," Jen said. "I'll take that as a compliment." The story spread through the station like wildfire. By the next day, everyone knew about the human maintenance worker and 4 Rylothian students who'd faced down 6 Krellian pirates, and won. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was the kind of story that became legend. Other species started looking at humans a little differently after that. Sure, they'd always known humans were tough. That persistence hunting thing was in all the xenobiology textbooks, usually in the chapter titled Terrifying Evolutionary Advantages. But this was different. This was a human fighting not for herself, but for 4 fuzzballs who couldn't defend themselves. That, more than any battle cruiser or weapons technology, made the galaxy take notice. And the Rylothians? Well, Enrollment in human-taught classes across the station increased by 300%. Turned out everyone wanted to learn from the species that would fight a losing battle just because 4 students jumped in to help. The Cubs became minor celebrities. They got their parade, actually. It was small and mostly consisted of their classmates cheering and throwing confetti made from recycled station reports, but still. A parade was a parade. Pip wouldn't stop talking about it for weeks, much to everyone's exhaustion. Jen went back to fixing air recyclers and patching hull breaches. She did finally repair that airlock panel, mostly because Thress threatened to dock her pay and possibly throw her out said airlock if she didn't. And she continued teaching her safety classes, now with significantly more students and at least 4 fuzzy teaching assistants who insisted on demonstrating improper safety procedures so Jen could correct them. It was chaos, but it was good chaos. Grak Thor. He left the station and never came back. Rumor has it he retired from piracy and took up accounting on some backwater planet where nobody had ever heard of the incident. Something about the experience of being outsmarted by a maintenance worker and 4 space otters had broken something fundamental in his criminal spirit. He'd faced down warships before, but nothing had prepared him for Jen Vasquez and her students. 6 months later, Pip approached Jen after class. He was holding a datapad nervously, his paws twitching the way they did when he was excited about something. "Miss Vasquez," he said, "I wanted to thank you for, everything, for believing we could help, even when we really couldn't." Jen smiled and ruffled the fur on his head, which he pretended to hate, but secretly loved. She'd learned all their tells by now. "You did help, Pip. You gave me a chance. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. I'm writing a paper," he continued, holding up the datapad, "for my xenobiology class, about humans, about why you fight even when you shouldn't, about why you protect others even when it's dangerous." "Oh yeah, what's your thesis?" Pip looked up at her with those big otter eyes, and in them was something that looked a lot like understanding. The kind of understanding that takes most species decades to develop. That humanity's greatest strength isn't their endurance or their stubbornness or their ability to throw wrenches really hard, he said. It's that they can't stand to see someone in trouble without helping, even if that someone is 4 idiots who jumped into a fight they had no business being in. Jen laughed and pulled all 4 cubs into a hug, ignoring their squeaks of protest and Mira's complaint that her fur was getting messed up. "Yeah," she said, her voice soft. "That sounds about right." And somewhere in the galaxy, on stations and planets and ships throughout civilized space, the story continued to spread. The story of the human who was surrounded and the cubs who jumped into the fight, and how together they proved that sometimes the most important battles aren't won by the strongest, or the fastest, or the most advanced. Sometimes they're won by a maintenance worker with a wrench and 4 fuzzy idiots with more heart than sense. And really, when you think about it, that's the most human thing of all.